Here we are with a Kickstarter preview of Legends Untold. And when the designer reached out to me asking if I was interested, I looked up the game a little bit and thought that it really fit with my interest as a gamer and also my interest in terms of doing videos for the channel. So I said, by all means, feel free to send it to me. But it sounded like a really big kind of large scope game. And I said, you're sending from the UK and I'm in New York and this might be a lot of postage. And he said, well, it's a small box. And in fact, here it is, a small box. But there's a really big game in this small box. And I just want to pull back and show you. I've got 4 characters set up here. Now, these are all set up on my table as if one person was playing all 4 of them, which you may or may not choose to do. I'll get into that later in the video, but it's a pretty big footprint, and indeed it is a big game in a small box, and we'll get into my thoughts about that. I do want to say this is a Kickstarter preview of the game, and I don't know the designer. I exchanged some email with him, with 2 people on the design team answering some of my questions, but never did they ask me what I was going to say in my review, nor was there any discussion of that whatsoever. So we're going to get going with a discussion of this game, which is a cooperative cave delve for 1 to 4 unlikely heroes. At its most basic, this is a dungeon crawl, basically in this case a cave crawl, where you are sending characters through various locations that you pull from the location deck. And this is a card-based game, and the location deck is here. You would be pulling random locations and setting them up based on some rules that we're not going to go over, but in effect, you need to match, if you can, the exit ambient, dark, or light, or bright light to create your map, and you're traveling through. I think for me playing it, the heart of the game come with the way you put together your heroes with their various skill talents. So we see here, for an example, this is based on a suggested setup for a starting character who is the student, and we see attributes here that will be familiar to some of you, at least in some form, who have played similar type of D&D RPG type of games. And they have various skill talents. They have 2 slots at the outset for skill talents that you can choose whatever you want. As I said, I'm using this based on their suggested setup. They will all come with a basic weapon. In this case, it's a spear. And the upgrade to that is very clever here because it's a simple single card that you, when you are able to upgrade, turn over and have some upgraded stats on that. And in addition, the weapons come with the talents. So there is, in this particular case, the ability, this symbol means in effect to exhaust in this game parlance, or to tap, for those of you that play Magic, tap the card to use the additional ability, in this case a weapon talent, and the skill talents that come with the hero also come with additional talents. We'll get into some of the cards in a minute, because to me the game really shines when you are working with more than one character in a party and you are able to lend your talent to your compadre if it works out that way. And we'll talk about when that can happen. What are you trying to do? Well, you have various scenarios that you would pull. In this case, you have a story or sentences here that are telling you some background in terms of what's going on, specific rules for the scenario, and the time that you have to complete this scenario. And these event cards are also doubling as a time measure, because certain things will cause you within the game to have to pull out a card that is a time measure until you run out of them. And there are certain things that happen when you run out. Now, so you will be encountering various obstacles along the way. And one of the things I enjoyed most about this game was the fact that some of the obstacles are what are called team trials, like I'm showing you here with this island hop, where one talent from another character may be lent to the person, the hero taking the test. So each other hero may contribute something. And let's just show you what that might mean. So here you are finding an island jutting out of the water, and there's an old damaged boat nearby. You have some choices as to what you can do here. And it will show you what the choice is and what the attribute for that choice is. And it will also then give you the number that you need to roll against to succeed. So you need to roll, you're working with 3 dice here, unless you have mastery over something, which is an attribute that is on certain cards. If you match it up, you get to roll a 4th die. But for this purpose, we're talking about 3 dice. You need to get or exceed the number that you see. And there are different ways to try to overcome this obstacle. So in this case, you have your attempt to throw, which is using the touch attribute, to mend, which is also a touch attribute, or to swim, which is the brawn attribute. And again, to remind you that these are the attributes that come with the character. So you have this base modifier to your die roll. However, this is a team trial, as I said, and you can see that right up here, which means that you can get help. So one of the choices that you may have is what help to use. And one of your companions on the journey may have metallurgy, and in that case, they could lend +2 to a mend test. So looking back at this card, we can remember that there are actually, there's the mend test here, which is to roll against a 16, so we could get a +2 if we decided to use that. On the other hand, maybe we're also traveling with somebody who has this solid attribute, which says that we can use this to reduce the damage from one source by 1. Now, we would be taking a bet here that we might fail if we use that, because we can see that the failure of these tests is indicated in red, and 2 of the 3 result in some wounds. This results in 2 wounds, this results in 1 wound. If we felt not so great about what we were going to attempt, we could potentially reduce the wound by 1, but if we would need to choose that card before making the decision. So these team trials really call into play the relationship among the characters and the various attributes they have. And you can spend a lot of time, if you're playing by yourself, and certainly if you're playing with other people, trying to figure out which card to use, because in these cases, the card once used is exhausted and cannot be used again until it is restored. And of course, there are simply obstacles that the lead hero needs to overcome by themselves. For example, this barrier, which is that of a flooded tunnel. Now, this one actually uses some of the same attributes that I showed you earlier, but let's take a little bit of a closer look at the benefits, which are in green here, and the consequences in red for either succeeding or failing on this test, because they bring into play another aspect of the game, which is quite interesting. This eye icon means bold, and the eye icon with a line through it means careless. There are different stances that you can have in the game. The one in the middle here is alert, and these refer to the stance of the party when it enters the next location. This is a barrier to a location, and depending on your success or failure with this barrier, you will either enter as bold, or you will enter as alert, or you will enter as careless. And the implications of that are significant. The icon here refers to spending time. So you're going to be spending time in 2 of the 3, even if you succeed. And again, this heart refers to obtaining a wound if you fail. So one of the things about this game are that things are very connected in a way that's realistic. If you envision yourself traveling through caves, that something that is going to be happening here as you enter a room will actually impact what happens to you when you're inside the room. So each card is related to other cards, both in terms of the way you can use cards and attributes from one character with another one, and also the way it affects the party as a whole, moving through the game, moving through the caves, and spending time in the game. Well, you may say to yourself, so what? It doesn't sound so bad if I'm careless. But here you can see an example of what happens if you're careless with this spiked pit. So this line here tells you, here's that careless icon again, that if you enter this room and there's this trap in this location and you're entering it and your party is careless, you automatically trigger the trap. There's really no way around it, and you're going to take 3 wounds. So that's pretty significant. You're not even going to have the opportunity to try to avoid it by leaping over it or disarming it by probing it. So this careless factor in the game is quite significant. There is so much more to the game that I haven't even begun to tell you about, but I don't really want to tell you how the game works anymore. I want to tell you how the game feels, because I think that is the best way to describe the game. So there's different ways of playing it. You can play solo with one character, and they suggest if you do that, you take an extra attribute, and that attribute is grit, and you will definitely need it. It's a tough game. There are lots of obstacles that you will encounter, lots of discoveries and barriers and things that you need to make, and many decisions, and you don't have a lot of resources when you start out. So playing it solo with one character is very challenging, and you do feel very alone. And I think this is where the game shines most, as I said earlier, is in the interplay between the characters. Whether you're playing by yourself and taking on more than one character in a party, which is what I would do and what I would recommend, because it's just more interesting that way. You really get to make use of the cards and how they can relate to each other and the choices that you make. It's almost like a hand management game. It turns into a card game-like feel, particularly if you're playing 4 characters, and each of your 4 characters at the beginning has a couple of skills and a weapon and then a weapon skill. There are, just doing the math there, you can see how many different combinations potentially there are, and how many decisions to make, when to use a card, when to contribute an attribute from another character if the test that you are undertaking allows that, or which hero to send to do the test to start with. And this turns it into almost a puzzle-like card game during the cave crawl experience, which for me is a real benefit. I really enjoyed that. Playing it with other people, I also played a couple of rounds with one other person, and one time we each had 1 character and another time we each had 2. So the set that I was given was up to 4 characters. And it also felt very different playing it that way, and it really shined as a co-op game because there was a lot of conversation back and forth between us. Should we do this? Should we use this card? Should we not? And so the experience of playing it alone with one character, playing it alone with 4 characters, and you could certainly do 2, 3, or 4, and then playing it with another person, very different feel. So it felt most like a traditional sort of RPG kind of dungeon crawl when I was playing with another person and we each had 2 characters, and it felt most like a puzzly kind of card management, hand management game when I was playing by myself with 4 characters. It was just awesome that way. For me, that would be my preferred way of playing it. A note about the rules and about the art and really what I was given as a prototype. There was a note with the box that I got saying, we know the cards are laminated and this is just a prototype. And I guess you can kind of see they are laminated cards, but honestly, I really actually like them. It was almost like having them sleeved, very easy to shuffle. Obviously, this is not going to be how the final game is, but I found the art that was there to be very thematic and very consistent. I'm just showing you some of it. I guess I've actually already showed you these before, so let me try to pull in something different here. I have no idea what art is final and what art is not, but I enjoyed the art quite a lot that was here. It as I said, it had a consistency to it that I appreciated. For me, when the art is inconsistent, it takes me out of the game and it kind of compromises the immersion that I might be feeling here. We didn't even get into anything about combat, but the combat system is excellently done and very dynamic because in combat, you can have different results that are not simply a damage result. So you can have a pushback or a push forward. You can also flee from combat. And it makes it feel very realistic. It makes it feel as if you are actually in action and actually in action. Well, it makes you feel as if you are in action because you can be trading blows with somebody. You can have an advance or you can make a strike. You can even fumble and mess something up yourself. And all of that is very realistic, yet it is resolved quite easily with die rolls and very streamlined. And a lot of it is abstracted in a way that makes the game continue to flow through the combat. And of course, you do have your skill attributes on the weapons and the weapons that you can upgrade. So there is that sense of progression in the game with that as well. Here we're just going to take a look a little bit more at some of the art and the cards, some things that you can find, because of course there is loot in the game. It's a discovery and it is a dungeon crawl after all, so you want to pick up some things along the way. Overall, I was very much captivated by this game. I found the rules, though I said at the beginning, here's some clothing that you can upgrade to at a certain point. Though I did have some questions about the rules, as I mentioned in the beginning, I emailed them. I actually found the rules to be pretty well done, pretty thorough, and honestly, I have purchased fully finished games with rules that are in much rawer state than these are. I wouldn't even characterize these rules as raw at all. There were a few things that I was confused about, maybe needed some clarification, but it was really well thought out, and the answers I got back from the people I emailed showed me that they had thought about these things quite carefully, and maybe it was a matter of expression or whatever, but I found the rules to be overall very clear, as well as the iconography on the cards. I looked through the cards for quite some time before I even opened up the rules just to see what I could piece together on my own. I often do that with a game to see really, is it self-explanatory in terms of the components, what's on there? And I figured a bunch of stuff out. So that to me says that the design is deep and rich and carries through the mechanics of the game from the written page to the display on the cards. So there you have it. These are my thoughts on Legends Untold Kickstarter preview.